Let me tell you something I have never told anyone. I have lived 400 of your Earth years. I have seen 3 suns die. I have buried more of my own kind than I can count on the limbs the gods gave me. And in all that time, in all that long, cold stretch of memory, there is only one night that still wakes me. Only one. It was the night the humans came. You laugh, I understand. Where you are sitting now in your soft rooms with your warm food and your small worries, the word human means nothing terrible. It means a creature on 2 legs, a soft thing, a short-lived thing. You hear it and you think of yourselves and you are not afraid. But out there, out past the edge of everything you have a name for, that word does not mean a creature. It means a warning. And I was there the night it became one. My name is Asuvantal. I served the concordance for most of my life. If that word means nothing to you, let me put it simply. The concordance was the great alliance of the old peoples, hundreds of worlds, thousands of tongues. We had crossed the dark between stars long before your ancestors learned to keep fire alive through the night. We thought we were the grown ones of the galaxy, the wise ones, the ones who had already learned every lesson worth learning. We were wrong about that. We were wrong about a great many things. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me slow down. Let me take you back to the place where it happened so you can see it the way I saw it, so you can feel the cold the way it sat in my bones. The world was called Drevon Sept. It was not a beautiful world. I want you to understand that. When the legends speak of it now, and they do in 100 tongues, they make it sound like a holy place. They paint the sky gold. They make the dust shine. That is how legends lie. The truth is that Drevon Sept was a miserable rock at the bottom of nowhere, and it stank of burned metal and old rain, and nobody wanted to die there. But we were dying there, all of us. The sky was the color of a bruise, not blue, not gray. That ugly green-purple you see under skin where the blood has pooled and gone wrong. The clouds never moved right. They hung low and they trembled, because the air itself was sick from the weapons we had been throwing at each other for 9 years. 9 years, say it slowly. 9 years of war on that one rock, and it was only one front of many. The rain, when it came warm. It should not have been warm. It came down warm and it left a film on your skin, and the young soldiers learned not to lick their lips after a storm, because the rain carried things in it that the labs could not name anymore. That was Drevon Sept. That was the place. Hold it in your mind. Now let me tell you who we were fighting. We called them the Hollow. Not because they were empty. They were anything but empty. We called them the Hollow because of the sound they made when they moved in great numbers, a low, dry rattle like wind through a dead reed, like something breathing through a throat that had no moisture left in it. You heard that sound at the edge of your hearing first. Then you felt it in your chest. Then you saw them. I will not pretend to describe them well. I have tried over the years and I always fail. They were tall. They were thin in a way that should not have been able to hold weight, and yet they carried weapons that could level a city block. Their skin, if it was skin, did not reflect light. It drank it. You would look at one of them and your eye would slide off as if your own body did not want to admit it was real. They did not speak, not to us. We tried in the early years. We sent envoys with every translation matrix we owned. We sent gifts. We sent surrender in the end on 3 worlds. None of it mattered. The Hollow did not want our worlds. They did not want our resources. We learned slowly and horribly that they simply did not want us to exist. There is a particular kind of fear that comes from that, from an enemy you cannot bargain with. You can fight a thing that wants what you have. You can give it up. You can run. But a thing that only wants you gone, there is nowhere to run from that. It follows. It is patient. For 9 years on Drevon Sept, they had been patient with us. And we were almost finished. I want you to understand how bad it was near the end, because that is the part the legends leave out. My company, I should say what was left of my company, held a ridge above a dry riverbed on the southern line. We had started the campaign with 800. By the night I am telling you about, we were 91. 91 tired soldiers from 11 different worlds, all of us speaking through the old battle cant because half our translators had burned out and the other half we no longer trusted. We had not slept properly in 20 days. We had not eaten warm food in longer. The supply runs had stopped coming because the ships that brought them stopped coming back, and after a while the Concordance does not waste ships on a line that is already dead. That was the thing nobody said out loud. We were already dead. The orders we still received were not orders to win. They were orders to delay, to hold the ridge one more day, to buy time for evacuations happening somewhere we would never see, for people we would never meet. We were a clock, that was all, a clock made of tired soldiers counting down. I remember the young ones the worst. There was a gunner named Selka from one of the marsh worlds barely past her first molt. She used to sing under her breath to keep her hands steady. Low marsh songs the kind mothers sing. By the end she had stopped singing. She just stared at the green sky and waited. They all did eventually. They got that look. The look that says, I have already given up the part of me that hoped, and now I am only waiting for the rest to catch up. I had that look too. I will not pretend I was braver than my soldiers. I was their commander, and I had stopped believing we would see another season. And then the message came. It came at the worst hour of the night, when the cold sits deepest and the mind plays its cruelest tricks. Our communications officer, a quiet old soldier named Brenduth, woke me by touching my shoulder. He did not speak. He just held out the receiver, and in the green dark I could see that his hands were shaking, and Brenduth's hands never shook. The message was short. It came from Concordance Command, far above us, from people who slept in clean beds. It said reinforcements inbound, hold the ridge, the Terrans are coming. I read it 3 times. Terrans, I said, what is a Terran? Brenduth did not know. None of us knew. We passed the word down the line, soldier to soldier in the dark, and it traveled through 11 worlds worth of tongues, and not one of us had ever heard the word. A new species. That is what we understood eventually. A new member of the Concordance. Some small client world from the far arm, one of the hundreds that signed treaties and were never heard from again. We had a saying for worlds like that, numbers on a ledger. They sent us their young when we asked, and we spent them, and that was the whole of our acquaintance. We were being sent, another world's young to die beside us. I remember the bitterness I felt. I am not proud of it now, but I felt it. I thought, they are sending us children to make the clock tick 1 hour longer. I thought of those poor creatures, whoever they were, flying down through that bruised sky to a rock that was already lost. Also the ledger could show 1 more day of resistance. I did not pity them as friends. I pitied them as you might pity an animal walking willingly toward a snare. I was wrong about them too. They came down at dawn, if you could call it dawn. The sun on Drevon Sept never truly rose. It only made the bruise in the sky glow a little less darkly. But in that half-light we heard the engines. Now I had heard 1,000 kinds of engine in my life. Every species in the Concordance built their craft to their own nature. The Vorus ships sang as they descended, a high crystalline note. The Gale ships came down silent on gravity cushions, ashamed of noise. My own people's transports made a deep, dignified hum, like a held breath. The Terran ships did not sing, they did not hum, they did not glide. They screamed. I have no better word. They came down through that sick sky like falling iron trailing fire, shaking the ground before they even touched it, and the sound they made was an ugly, defiant, tearing roar, as if the vessels themselves were furious to be alive. My soldiers came up out of their holes to look. We could not help it. We had never heard anything like it. The ships landed hard, too hard. By Concordance standards they were practically crashes. The landing struts dug trenches in the dirt. Steam and dust boiled up around them. And I thought, with that same old bitterness, they have sent us cripples. Look how badly they fly. And then the ramps came down. And the humans walked out. Let me describe them to you the way I saw them that first morning, not the way the legends do, the way they actually were. They were small. That was the first thing. The very first thing every one of us thought. They were small. Most of them came up to my chest, some barely to my waist. They had soft, round heads with the eyes set forward like predators, yes, but everything else about them was soft. No carapace, no scales, no spines. Just a thin covering of that strange pink-brown hide with little tufts of fur on the top of the head and nowhere useful. They wore armor, but it was crude armor, simple plating over cloth, nothing like the elegant shells the rest of us wore. They had no claws to speak of. Their hands ended in little flat nails, useless for tearing. Their mouths were full of small, blunt teeth. When one of them opened its mouth, I expected fangs and saw instead a row of dull pebbles. I looked at them, and I felt my last hope die. This is what they sent us, I thought. Soft little things with pebble teeth. We are finished. And then I noticed the way they moved. It is hard to explain. You will not understand it unless you have spent your whole life around soldiers of every kind. There is a way that the doomed move, and there is a way that the dangerous move, and they are not the same. The doomed move carefully, as if the world is made of glass and they are already half broken. The dangerous move loosely, easily, like the world belongs to them and always has. The humans moved loosely. They came down those ramps and they looked around at that dead green world, at the trenches and the bodies and the sick sky, and they did not flinch. One of them spat on the ground. Another laughed at something a companion said. They cracked their joints. They adjusted their crude little weapons. They walked into the worst place in the galaxy as if they were arriving at a job they had done 100 times before. I did not understand it. It frightened me a little, and I did not know why. Selka, my gunner, was beside me. She watched them too, and she said very quietly in the old battle cant, "Commander, they're not scared." "They don't know what's coming," I told her. But that was not quite true, and some part of me already knew it was not quite true. Their commander found me within the hour. I had expected to be ignored. New client species usually attach themselves to a concordance officer and waited to be told where to die. Instead, before I had even finished organizing my line, a human came striding up the ridge toward my position, helmet under one arm, and stood in front of me as if we were equals. She was not a large human, even by their standards. She had dark hide, darker than most of her soldiers, and her head fur was cut close to the skull and shot through with gray. There were lines around her eyes. I would learn later that humans wear their years on their faces, that you can read a human's life in the creases of its skin the way you read the rings of a felled tree. She looked up at me, far up, for I am tall even among my own kind, and she did not seem to find the difference in our sizes important at all. "You're the ranking officer here," she said. Her translator was a cheap one. It clipped the ends of her words. "I am Subcommander Asuvantal," I said. "I hold this ridge." "Colonel Imelda Reyes," she said. "3rd Terran Expeditionary. We're attached to your line as of now." She looked past me at my soldiers, at the thin, ragged line of us, and something moved across her face. I could not read human faces yet, but now, looking back, I know what it was. It was the look of someone counting the survivors and not liking the number. "How long have you been holding this position, Sub-Commander?" 9 years on this world," I said. 200 days on this ridge." She was quiet for a moment. 200 days, she repeated, with 90 men. 91, I said. I do not know why I corrected her. The dead deserve to be counted, perhaps. She nodded slowly, and then she said something I have never forgotten. She said it quietly, not for my benefit, almost to herself. "We should have come sooner." I did not understand her then. I thought it was an empty courtesy, the kind of thing client officers say. Now I know it was a confession, and I know what it cost her to say it. But that morning I only thought she was strange and small and probably about to die, and I turned back to my line and put her out of my mind. I had a ridge to lose. The hollow came that evening. We felt them before we heard them the way you always did, a pressure in the chest, a wrongness in the air. The pack animals that some of the worlds kept for hauling went silent and then began to scream and would not stop. The young soldiers checked their weapons too many times. The old ones stopped checking at all. And then, far out across the dry riverbed, in the failing green light, the rattle began. That dry, dead reed sound. That sound like a throat with no moisture. It started small and then it grew, because there were not 10 of them coming or 100. There were thousands. They came up out of the dusk in a tide, a black tide that drank the light, and the rattle of them was so loud now that it drowned out my own voice when I called the line to ready. I had seen hollow assaults before. I had survived 4 of them on that ridge. Each one had taken soldiers from me that I never got back. I knew, looking at the size of this one, that it was the last. There were too many. We would hold for a while, and we would kill a great many of them, and then they would come over the top of us, and that would be the end of the ridge and the end of my company and the end of me. I made my peace with it. There is a calm that comes at the very end when you finally stop hopping. I felt it settle over me like cold water. I drew my sidearm. I found Selka in the line and put my hand on her shoulder, and she looked up at me, and neither of us said anything because there was nothing left to say. And then I looked down the line and I saw the humans. They had taken the forward positions. I had not ordered them to. They had simply done it, moved up into the most exposed holes, the ones closest to the riverbed, the ones we had stopped using because to hold them was to die first. They were spread out along the lip of the ridge, those small, soft creatures, and they were doing something I had never seen soldiers do before a battle of this size. They were calm. Not the calm of the doomed, not the cold water calm I had just felt settle over my own bones. A different calm, a working calm. They were talking to each other in low voices, checking each other's gear. One of them, a big one for a human, broad across the shoulders, was walking the line with a flask, and he was joking. I could hear the laughter answer him, low and rough, down the row of holes. As the black tide rolled toward us across the riverbed, these creatures were laughing. I thought they had gone mad. I thought, they do not understand. They cannot see what is coming. But they could see. Colonel Reyes was forward with them in the most dangerous hole of all, and she had a long viewing glass to her eye, and she was watching the hollow tide come on, and she was not afraid. I could see her face in profile against the dying light. She was studying them. The way you study a problem. The way you study a thing you intend to take apart. She lowered the glass. She said something into her communicator, and all down the human line those crude weapons came up, and a silence fell over them, not a frightened silence, but a held one, a poised one, the silence of a predator gone still the moment before it moves. That was when I first felt it, the thing I had felt in the morning when they walked off the ramps without flinching. The cold thread of it ran down my spine. I had been pitying them all day. I suddenly was not sure they were the ones who needed pity. The hollow hit the line. I will try to tell you what happened, but you must understand that battle is not a clean thing in the memory. It comes back in pieces, in sounds, in single terrible moments lit up bright while everything around them stays dark. I will give you the pieces. You will have to make the whole. The first thing was the sound of the human weapons. I had heard 1,000 kinds of weapon. Concordance weapons were elegant. They hummed and they sang and they cut. The hollow weapons made almost no sound at all, which was part of their horror. Death came silent. But the human weapons barked. It was an ugly, violent, hammering noise. A noise like a fist on a metal door, over and over. Faster than a heartbeat. It was a primitive noise. It was the noise of solid metal being thrown at terrible speed by burning chemicals, the way your people made war 10,000 years ago, the way the rest of the galaxy had abandoned long before any of us crossed the dark. And I thought, in that first instant, they are firing rocks. They have brought rocks to fight the Hollow. And then I saw what the rocks did. The Hollow, you understand, did not fear our weapons. Our elegant beams and our humming cutters, they had learned them over 9 years. Their black light-drinking hide turned our energy aside, scattered it, drank it the way it drank the daylight. To kill a Hollow with a concordance weapon, you had to hit it many times in exactly the right place, and they never gave you the time. But there is no clever defense against a rock. The human rounds tore through that black hide as if it were wet paper. The Hollow at the front of the tide simply came apart, not scattered, not turned aside, came apart in pieces flung backward into the ones behind them. The hammering of the human guns rolled down the line in an unbroken wall of sound, and the front of that great black tide, the tide that I had already made my peace with dying against, the front of it just stopped. It crumpled. It fell. I had never seen the Hollow stop. In 9 years, I had never once seen them stop. But the Hollow were not stupid. I have to make that clear. They were patient and they learned. They had broken every clever thing the Concordance had ever brought against them. And so, after that first terrible volley, they did what they always did. They poured forward over their own dead. They came on faster in greater numbers to overwhelm the line by sheer weight before it could fire again. It was the right move against any of us. It was the wrong move against humans. Because here is the thing I learned about humans that night, the thing the whole galaxy would learn in the years that followed, the thing that changed everything. The humans were not afraid of being close. Every other species in the Concordance, every single one fought to keep the enemy at a distance. Distance was safety. Distance was civilization. To let the enemy reach you, to let it come within the length of your own body, was to have already lost. We built our whole way of war on the simple wisdom that you do not want to be near the thing that wants to kill you. The humans did not believe this. When the hollow tide came over the lip of the ridge and into the human holes, when those tall black shapes loomed up over the small soft creatures, close enough to touch, the humans did not break. They did not run. They did something that I will remember until the day I die. They stood up. They stood up into it. They rose out of their holes to meet the hollow, and when the rocks ran out, when their hammering weapons clicked empty, they did not stop fighting. They drew shorter weapons, blades and bars and ugly little things, and they went forward into the mass of the enemy, close enough that the light-drinking hide brushed against their crude armor, and they fought with their hands. With their hands. I watched the broad-shouldered human, the one who had been joking with the flask, take hold of a hollow twice his height. I watched him plant his small, soft body against that nightmare and drive a blade up under whatever passed for its jaw and wrench, and the hollow came apart at his hands, and he did not even pause. He threw the pieces aside and reached for the next one. There was a sound rising over the battle now. I did not understand it at first. It was coming from the humans, from the small, soft creatures who should have been dying. They were shouting. Not in fear, in something else. They were shouting to each other, names and curses and rough barking words, and some of them, I swear this is true, you may believe it or not, some of them were laughing, even then, even there, with their hands buried in the death they had come to fight. It was the most terrifying sound I have ever heard. It is the sound that wakes me still. It was the sound of a creature that had decided it would rather die fighting than live any other way. And there were 200 of them, and they all believed it at once. The hollow had never met anything like it. I want to dwell on this because this is the heart of it. This is the thing the legends get half right and wholly wrong. The hollow were not afraid of dying. We had established that over 9 years. They came on into our weapons without hesitation, wave after wave, indifferent to their own losses. You cannot frighten a thing that does not care whether it lives. But the hollow had also never met a thing that did not care whether it lived. They had only ever fought us, the careful peoples, the distance keepers, the ones who valued our own lives so highly that we built our whole war around protecting them. The hollow understood that. They had built their tactics around it. They overwhelmed us precisely because they knew we would always, in the end, flinch from death. They counted on the flinch. The flinch was the whole strategy. The humans did not flinch. And I watched Asuvantal with my own eyes on the ridge above the dry riverbed. I watched the impossible happen. I watched the hollow hesitate. It rippled back through the black tide like a wave going the wrong way. The front ranks, meeting the humans, meeting that wall of laughing soft-bodied fury that would not break, that came forward when it should have fallen back, that fought with hands and teeth when its weapons ran dry, the front ranks faltered. And the ranks behind them, feeling the falter, slowed. And the rattle, that dry, dead reed rattle that had never once wavered in all my 9 years, the rattle broke. It stuttered. For just a moment, the whole vast tide of the hollow stood still on the lip of our ridge, and I understood, with a shock that I felt in my teeth, that they did not know what to do. They had never been afraid before. They did not have the shape of it in them. And now, for the first time, something had reached up out of the dirt and shown them their own end, and they did not know how to hold it. The humans gave them no time to learn. Colonel Reyes was the one who turned it. I saw it happen, and I will tell you exactly how, because someone should. She came up out of the forward hole, the most dangerous hole, the one I had abandoned days before, and she stood up on the very lip of the ridge, in full view of the entire hollow tide, small and gray-furred and utterly without fear, and she raised one of the human weapons over her head, and she shouted. I do not know what she shouted. The translator did not catch it. It did not need to. Some words do not need translating. The body says them in every tongue. She was shouting, "Forward." And the humans went forward. 200 of them, off the ridge, down into the riverbed, into the heart of a tide that outnumbered them 100 to 1. It was insane. It was the single most insane thing I had ever seen a soldier do. Every law of war I had ever learned screamed that it was suicide. And it worked. Because the hollow were already breaking, you see. They were already feeling, for the first time in their long and terrible existence, the thing that they had spent 9 years teaching us to feel. And when those 200 soft-bodied creatures came roaring down off the ridge instead of waiting to die on it, when the prey turned and ran toward the predator with murder in its small forward-set eyes, the hollow did the thing they had never done. They ran. I will never forget it. The black tide which had drowned worlds, which had broken the proud old peoples one by one across 9 years of darkness, that tide turned and fled from 200 creatures the size of children. We followed them. Of course we did. My 91, what was left of them, came up out of our holes and went down off the ridge behind the humans, screaming our own battle chant, all 11 worlds of us. And for the first time in 200 days we were not the clock counting down. We were soldiers. We were soldiers winning. I do not remember most of what came after. I told you battle returns in pieces. I remember the riverbed full of running shapes. I remember Selka beside me, and she was singing again, her low marsh song but loud now, almost a scream, a war song, and I had never heard her sing like that. I remember the broad-shouldered human pulling one of my young soldiers out from under a fallen hollow and slapping him on the back and shoving him forward, and the two of them charging on together, though they had no common word between them. I remember the rattle dying, that dead reed sound that had haunted my sleep for 9 years. I remember it growing thinner and thinner as the hollow scattered into the dark, until at last it was gone, and there was only the sound of our own ragged breathing, and the hammering of the human guns growing distant, and the wind. And I remember stopping at last, far out in the riverbed, in the full dark now, with the bruised sky overhead, and realizing that I was alive, that my soldiers were alive, that the ridge had held, that the impossible thing had happened and we were still standing on the wrong side of the end of the world. I dropped to my knees in the dirt. I am not ashamed to tell you that. A 400-year-old soldier of the Concordance, kneeling in a dry riverbed on a dead world, shaking. A shadow fell over me. I looked up. It was Colonel Ray's. She was covered in the black ichor of the hollow from her boots to the gray fur of her head. She was bleeding from a wound over one eye. She was breathing hard, and she reached down one small soft hand, that hand with the useless flat nails, that hand I had pitied that morning, and she offered it to me. To help me up. I looked at that small hand for a long time, and then I took it, and she was stronger than she had any right to be. She pulled me to my feet, this creature half my size, and she looked up at me with those forward-set eyes, and her mouth pulled back from her blunt pebble teeth, and I flinched, because I thought it was a threat display. I know better now. It was a smile. "Told you we should have come sooner," she said. And then she laughed, and God's help me, so did I. That was the first night. That was the night the word human began to change its meaning across the galaxy. Not in the great halls of the Concordance. They would not understand for years yet, the ones who slept in clean beds. But there on that ridge, among the 91 of us who had already buried our hope, the word changed forever. We had a new word for salvation, and the word was Terran. But I want to be honest with you, because honesty is the only thing I have left worth giving. The story is not as simple as the legends make it. What I have told you so far is the part that is glorious, the part you want to hear. The soft creatures who turn the tide, the impossible victory, the smile in the dark. There is another part. Because that night, in the joy of being alive, I did not understand what I had truly seen. I thought I had watched bravery. I thought I had watched discipline. I thought the humans had simply been less afraid than the rest of us, and that their courage had carried the day. It was not courage, or it was not only courage. I would learn in the days and the months that followed what the humans actually were. I would learn why they fought the way they fought. I would learn the thing about them that no other species in the Concordance had ever guessed, the thing that made the old peoples first revere them, and then, quietly, begin to fear them. I would learn what Colonel Ray's meant much later, when I asked her how her people could possibly stand and fight the hollow with their bare hands, and she looked at me with those tired, creased eyes, and said the words that I have carried with me through every year since. But that is a story for the next telling. That is the part where the legend stops being beautiful and starts being true. That is where I learned what we had really brought down out of the sky onto Drevon Sept, and what it would mean for all of us forever. For now, let me leave you here, on the ridge above the dry riverbed, in the dark, with the rattle gone silent at last. Let me leave you with the one thing I knew for certain that first night, before I understood anything else. I knew that the galaxy had been a quiet place before that night, a careful place, a place of distance keepers and rules, of old wise peoples who valued their own lives above all, and built their whole long civilization on the wisdom of the flinch. And I knew, watching 200 small soft creatures chase the terror of the stars into the dark with murder in their hearts and laughter in their throats, that the quiet was over. Something new had stepped onto the battlefield. And nothing, not the Concordance, not the hollow, not the long cold dark itself, nothing would ever be the same again.